Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm Dr. Rhoda Bernard, founding managing director of the Berkeley Institute for Accessible Arts Education and the assistant chair of the Music Education Department at Berklee College of Music. And I am proud to present this podcast featuring disabled artists and arts educators. We are inviting artists with disabilities to be guest hosts for the Able Voices podcast. Today's guest host is Rivky Grossman. Rivky is a New York City-based singer-songwriter, recipient of the New York Arts Grant, has been nominated for the IMEA Awards, and has been selected for the New York Musical Theater's top female finalists in 2022. Her song Hear Me Honey was produced by Grammy-winning Amy Lee of Evanescence. Rivky's music has appeared on PBS's Mysteries of Mental Illness. Her career jump-started composing for Off-Broadway, meeting her friend and cellist Brian Saunders, releasing their first album, inviting them to the Kennedy Center, and stages featuring Suzanne Vega. Other projects include co-creating a musical currently in development with playwright Vincent Grappelli. Rivky currently hosts Melody Left Behind, celebrating performers living with schizophrenia, psychosis, autism, and those who experience the stage just a little differently, pushing the boundary to welcome more neurodiverse inclusion on mainstream music stages, which often doesn't exist for every unique artist.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm your guest host today, and my name is Rivky. My pronouns are she, they. I'm queer, non-binary, light-skinned with auburn short hair, beautifully flabby around my tummy and hips. And yeah, so thanks so much for joining us as we continue to celebrate and spotlight disabled artists. I'm a disabled artist myself, and I'll be speaking with disabled artists. And today on our segment, I'll be introducing you to Gaelynn Lea. Gaelynn Lea won NPR Music's Tiny Desk contest in 2016, and she's been on the road ever since, playing her unique mix of haunting original songs and traditional fiddle tunes. In addition to performing and recording, Gaelynn also does speaking engagements about disability, finding inner freedom, and the power of music. Gaelynn has a congenital disability called osteogenesis imperfecta, or brittle bones disease. In recent years, she has used her music as a platform to advocate for people with disabilities and to promote positive social change. Gaelynn Lea has also been featured on PBS NewsHour, on Being with Krista Tippett, the Moth Radio Hour, the Science of Happiness podcast, and via 2 widely viewed TEDx Talks. And over the years, she has collaborated and performed with many notable artists such as Michael Stipe from REM, the Decemberists, Wilco, and the industrial rock supergroup Pigface. In 2022, Gaelynn Lea composed and recorded the original score for Macbeth on Broadway, starring Daniel Craig and Ruth Negga, thanks to a recent Whippoorwill Arts Fellowship. Her theatrically inspired soundtrack is set to be released in spring of 2025. A tour for this new album, Music for Macbeth, will take place in the UK soon afterwards. And in 2023, Gaelynn Lea co-wrote, acted, and sang in a new musical Fable for the stage with disabled storyteller Kevin Kling. And their show Invisible Fences premiered at Open Eye Theater. This fantastical music-filled production touches on disability, identity, and the stories we tell ourselves. Invisible Fences will be revived in November 2024 at Zeitgeist Theater in Duluth, Minnesota. And Gaelynn Lea now is currently writing a book, or rather finished a book, I think, about her touring adventures and disability advocacy called Linger in the Sun. And Linger in the Sun will be a love letter to everybody, a warm, funny, and deeply felt memoir about disability, music, and the messy creativity of an artist's life. Okay, Gaelynn, hi. Welcome to our show. That is
Thanks for the introduction.
beautiful, long, beautiful, very detailed. There's a lot to get through, and I don't know how much time we'll have, but we're so glad to have you.
Yeah, it's really nice to be here. I'm Gaelynn Lea. I am a short white woman sitting in an electric wheelchair with a flower dress and long brown hair, and she, her pronouns, and from Duluth, Minnesota. So that's where I am right now.
Is it freezing there? Because it's cold in New York City.
Yeah, it's been right now. I think it's maybe not as bad, but we had weeks of like 0 degrees, and in Duluth we're a few months away from spring still. So
Oh,
It's
that's
not
good.
it's not going to warm up for a while here.
So, tell us about how you got your start. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, my very beginnings was in public school orchestra in fifth grade. I saw an orchestra play and I really wanted to do it. And luckily, the teacher was open minded and kind of helped me find a new method. So I play my violin because my arms and legs are shorter. I play my violin like a cello. So I did that through high school, not really thinking that music would be my career. It was just something I really loved to do. But as I aged, I started performing and writing my own music and really loving that. And I realized I did want to do music for a career. So I taught fiddle lessons for 3 years, kind of modified the way I teach for students who played the regular quote unquote way, and I still played like a cello, but it worked. We were able to communicate and taught maybe 15 students of all ages for a couple of years. And then I won the Tiny Desk contest, which really changed things
That's so
because
cool.
I was
Yeah.
performing a
Congratulations to
lot.
that.
I mean, many times a month. Very frequently, but it was all in like northern Minnesota, basically. So that my
Mhm.
first experience with touring wasn't until the Tiny Desk, and then things kind of evolved from there. And I decided to do it full time, in part out of practicality. Like my husband needs to travel with me because of my disability. I can't
Mm.
travel by myself, and so instead of having it be like a different personal care attendant for every trip, and that would have been a pretty nightmarish to coordinate on my end when I could be going with my husband. So he actually quit his job and started traveling with me. So then we kind of made that both of our careers, I guess, was kind of a big change in 2016, and that's sort of how it's been ever since.
Wow. Yeah, actually, I had a question about that, about your support system in place. But you know what?
Yeah,
Maybe I'll come back around to that a little bit
yeah,
later because yeah, that's just such an important part of also for people who deal with disabilities, and that's something that
yeah,
I've dealt with as well, like through the years. And I'm just like, how do people do it on their own? Like nobody ever talks about it because we're like living in a culture that always like prides themselves on like being independent, and so it's just such an important aspect. And to hear that you have your husband who's been by your side as sort of like this solid partnership is really incredible
yeah. We're
to hear
very.
that.
I'm very lucky. I mean, yeah, we'll definitely come back to that because I think that's
Yeah, yeah,
under
yeah.
discussed
Yes,
massively.
yes. Yeah. I think I read in one of those articles, I think it was by the National Endowment for the Arts, where you shared about how you first started playing the violin like a cello, as you had mentioned earlier, to try to modify the instrument due to your disability, and that like a teacher had said to you something like, let's work out a way for you to play, and then you said that some folks find that to be so inspiring, and yet you offer a different view by saying that, as remarkable as it is, it shouldn't be. And you said, like, I try to, talk to teachers about this whenever I can. And I think some people think of music and disability as only music therapy, which is, something that I personally also came across, which is really misguided, a misguided way to look at it. But
Yeah.
there are so many other reasons. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No. What's yeah. No. I'm just agreeing. Like you share that view. That's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, can you tell us about your experiences as a person with a disability and as an artist with a disability? And if you're comfortable also sharing a little bit more about how you can help us to understand what exactly is osteogenesis imperfecta?
Yeah. So my experience with disability, everybody's is unique, and there's no one way to like end up processing how your disability affects you. But for me, I was born with my disability. I've always had it. I was really fortunate to be in a super supportive household. I mean, where my parents, weren't trying to kind of shelter me too much or hold me back. And I got to say that I feel like of all the inequities, like parenting is a really big one that we don't talk about. And I felt really lucky, and I want parents to learn more about disability, even potential parents, so that we can start shaping how parents deal with it. But anyway, so I got really lucky. I was born with the disability. My parents were encouraged by a hospital in Minnesota to maybe have me do a bunch of surgeries because before I was born, a lot of my arms broke in
Wow.
utero, well, not a lot, both. There's only two arms, right? So
Yeah.
my arms
Yeah.
broke in utero, and so did my legs, and so they were
Wow.
bent at odd angles, and they still
Mhm.
are. But there
Mm.
was, doctors were pressuring my mom and dad into having me do a surgery early on,
Mhm.
and luckily my mom just wasn't comfortable with that. She said, she's too young to make that decision on her own, and I'm not really comfortable making that decision for her. So they left it up to me, and I had until puberty basically to decide
Mm.
if I wanted to have operations to try to straighten my arms and legs. And I eventually just like was kind of like, well, I don't need to walk to have a good life. Like, I don't want to have a bunch of operations with unclear outcomes.
Right. Right.
Just in this like goal of walking, and it was never pushed on me. I know a lot of people, especially in the former generations, like earlier, walking was seen as like the gold standard of like this is what you need to achieve, and there's so much emphasis was put on that, and I think to some extent it still is, but hopefully that's changing. So I didn't ever walk. I didn't ever. Of course, as a little kid, when you grow up different, you sometimes feel that sting of being kind of excluded or different, and so it's not like there was no grief around disability, but it eventually the grief around disability eventually kind of dissipated into just like, well, this is who I am. And so I grew up, you know, feeling like disability was part of my identity.
Mm.
And as I've learned more about disability culture, I obviously like feel even more strongly about that now that it's
Right.
I wouldn't be the same person without my disability. And because I enjoy my life and I feel like, I have something to offer the world, I don't actually feel like my disability is a negative thing. It doesn't mean that having a disability doesn't make things more complicated because our society is not set up for disability largely, and the programming for it is, a lot of work, and there's a lot of struggle about being disabled in America, but it's not my disability's problem. It's more like the rest of society. So as a disabled artist, I made music because I loved it. I had friends that were in orchestra. I eventually, when I graduated and went into college, I started playing with friends. Music was always just a huge source of joy for me. And then as a disabled artist, where it started kind of showing up is just recognizing and real like the more I traveled, the more I realized how inaccessible the music industry is for artists all over the world, not even just
Mm.
in the
Mm.
United States.
Mm. Mm.
And that's where like my artistry and activism kind of started to intersect, was when I got on the road. I realized like if we want to see more disability in
Yeah.
our culture, we have to make some real structural changes, because you can't expect people like, when I started out, people at a open mic had to like carry me to the bathroom, strangers, like,
Mm.
I'd go there by myself, I'd play music, but if I'd use the bathroom, a stranger had to set me on a chair in front of the toilet and then like wait outside for, it was like
Yeah.
weird stuff
Yeah.
like that where you're like, you shouldn't expect people to put up with that. Like, of course, you don't see as many disabled artists if it's so inaccessible. Or people would have to lift my wheelchair onto the stage, which isn't really safe. It's like a 300-pound wheelchair. I have brittle bones disease. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a lot of extra, like, not just labor, but not really safe scenarios that you're asking people to do to participate. So if you
Mm.
want more participation, you have to make it more accessible. So that's where I
Mm.
kind of the art and music. But generally my music is not actually about disability blatantly. There is one song that I think I will have you play, which which I wrote around the last time, 2017, when we're talking about cutting Medicaid. I wrote a
Mhm.
song called "I Wait," which was born out of frustration of disabled people not being included in that discussion at all about how important Medicaid is, and why we can't cut it. And here we are again, like 7 years later, talking about the same thing. And so I do think disability can inform my music, but largely I feel like it's such an integrated part of my personality that I couldn't take out. Like, there's
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
element of
Yeah.
disability in every song I write, but
Uh-huh.
I don't feel like I'm thinking about disability alone when I write most of the time.
Right.
Does that make
Mhm.
sense to
Mhm.
you?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
As a disabled artist, you probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you couldn't take it out of the equation. I mean, it's really part of you. I mean, it also sounds like to me, which kind of leads me a little bit into another question about you being raised inside of a, sort of theater family, right? Like your
Hmm.
parents owned was a theater restaurant or like a
Like a dinner theater, a little dinner theater company. Yeah.
and so it's kind of absolutely, I mean, I guess you could say even extraordinary that your parents kind of pretty much normalized your life. And so in some ways, I guess you had early access and accessibility was just the norm. And so once you kind of almost like, grew up and sort of entered the world outside of your family domain, I guess you started seeing more and more of like what needed to be done, in terms of inclusion. And that's a pretty powerful story of you having to be wheeled or lifted to the bathroom and not having proper access, and suddenly finding like, wait a second, there needs to be some change. So
Yeah. I guess for my parents, that, and I think this is a common theme, again, everybody's disability is different. Mental, like I also have mental health issues myself, but like if that was your only disability, and by only I mean if you didn't also have physical issues, for example, your experience is going to be different than mine. Or people who have vision loss are going to have a different experience. But for me, growing up in a supportive family, it really was a very jarring experience to become an adult, because
mhm,
largely you grow up feeling like anything I want to do, I'll put my mind to it and I'll be able to do it.
yeah.
And just realizing, like, I mean, a big part of my story, I mean, I just finished writing my memoir and it's going to come out in April of 2026, I believe. It's a long ways away, but it's coming. And
Congratulations
thank you. And
on
so when
that.
that
Yeah.
comes out, a lot of the hardest experiences were medical trauma.
Uh-huh.
Something I was completely wholly unprepared for
Hmm.
as a kid, like thinking that a doctor wouldn't listen to me because of my disability. You know what I mean? Like that kind of
Sure.
experience was so far from my family reality that
Mhm.
it really like was traumatizing. And then in terms of like, most of my teachers were great and then one of them wasn't.
Right.
And realizing that nothing I could do would make that person see me as an equal student
Mm.
as the other students, and so like those experiences were largely kept from me as a kid, which I appreciate actually, because now I don't have a sense that I am lesser than. But it's a rude awakening when you become an adult and you realize like, oh, this is not actually how a
Right,
lot of
right, right, right.
society
Your
functions.
reality was right, kind of stunted a little bit
Oh
or,
yeah.
kind of mildly distorted.
Yes, exactly. And
Yeah,
it's hard to like make peace with
sure,
that as an adult. You're like, whoa, okay.
sure.
So especially when it doesn't have to be that way, as we all know. Like,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for it just reminds me of me, like, attempting to, change things on the mainstream stage, for, like, when I was hosting an open mic, out at, say, Birdland Jazz Club and, like, discussing how maybe they can, like, change things a little bit, change the rule book a little bit, and they looked at me like I was absolutely crazy, for, expressing or conveying something differently, where I said, "Oh, I might have to stop in mid-song. Like, is that okay to have, somebody else perform?" And they're just like, "What are you talking about? Just don't come on stage." So it's hard
uh, yeah, that is hard.
to yeah, change accessibility in the mainstream. But is it was there any music you fell in love with simply by being inside of your parents' dinner theater that kind of, I don't know,
It's
like,
a great
influenced you?
question. Yeah, I never talk about this. I am obsessed with big band music because
Oh,
some of their earlier plays were like kind of like 40s vibes music, and
nice.
I don't play it, I don't sing it, but I listen to it a lot. Like jazz, jazz generally, but then specifically like Tommy Dorsey and Duke Ellington and all those older things. Like I really love that music, and I think that's specifically because my parents had a couple plays when I was early on
Oh,
that was
nice,
all that.
nice.
It's great music. I mean, there's so much great music, but that's got a special place in my heart. So that's a good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, do you think that that influences your music writing style? Because I know that a lot of times I've heard your music described more as, I don't know, like Irish or Celtic, storytelling, like folklore sort of style.
Yeah, I think probably where the music if big band has any influence, it's probably the strong melody. Like I really love having a really strong melody.
Mm.
But I think but the Celtic thing comes from, after high school, I realized I didn't want to keep doing classical music, so I switched over to Celtic music, and I don't know, really not intentional, but it creeps into my songwriting now. It's because and I also at night, like, so the dinner time is my like big band jazz era, and then when I sit down at night
Yeah.
to read, I'm always listening to Celtic music, so like I listen to it a lot, and it's kind of just worked its way in there. But melody, like timeless melodies, are something that I really love. And then for me, another music I fell in love with early, which wasn't because of my parents' dinner theater, but I
Mhm.
loved Simon and Garfunkel with like a burning
Mm.
passion. Like I had all of their albums at age 13, like weird. I don't know why I liked them so much, but I did. And then the Decemberists and Wilco and Neutral Milk
Nice.
Hotel. So like
Maybe could it be that,
lyric.
sometimes there's like, I don't know, like environmental factors, like maybe were connected to some, I don't know, something that happened to you then that sort of like jump started your
Yeah,
connection to
I don't
Garfunkel.
know. I just love their lyrics, the use of like poetic lyrics, but not necessarily like overly witty. Like, saying things in a beautiful way is important to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think the other thing I loved about Simon and Garfunkel and then later bands like Wilco is making musical instruments sound like other things. My favorite song
Mm.
by Simon and Garfunkel is called Old Friends Bookends, and
Uh-huh.
they make the orchestra sound like traffic noises at one point, and it kind of fades away, and it's just such a creative use of
Oh,
sound.
yeah, 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 yeah.
If you haven't heard that one, I would
That's
take a listen.
neato.
It's
Yeah,
pretty.
yeah. I kind of attempted to do that with one song that I had written called Stand Clear of the Closing Doors. And, I don't know if you're familiar with New York City trains, but, like
Yes,
kind of
that is real.
playing around on the piano with the kind of, ding dong.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so like your music is quite beautiful and deeply, the word haunting comes up a lot. I know I've heard that before, and
Thanks.
it's some of my music is sort of similar in that way. And I was wondering, like, even though a lot of folks say, oh, it's haunting, or it's kind of sad, and I don't know, it feels like it can also like bring out this feeling of like waiting at the edge for some light to come through it, like I don't know, like also like in anticipation of something uplifting that has the possibility to rise, even though like the melodies you write are like can sound like and be so dark and like feeling like it's filled with despair. Like I wonder if that's something you also experience both when you're performing, or I don't know if you're like listening back to your songs. Do you also feel like it has a sense of hope?
Yeah. That's a good observation. I think that's actually a really important part of songwriting to me is trying to convey the world a little more even-handed. Like there
Mm,
is a lot of suffering, but there is also a lot of beauty. And how do you hold those two things simultaneously?
yeah.
I think having a disability is a real reason that comes through in my music because I'm not gonna like sugarcoat and say that everything has always been great with like the way that life has always turned out, but yet it has been. You know what I mean? Like they are literally both true. And so I think
Right.
in my music, I want to, if I were to make an album that was 100% dark and angry, I wouldn't feel authentic about it because it's
Mm.
not there. Even in these dark times, for example, politically,
Oh yeah.
even
Oof.
right now, there are good things happening in the world, and it doesn't mean that you're talking about toxic positivity. It's just like literally true. Like there
Right.
is good and
Yeah.
bad all the time, and music to me is a way to kind of hold that contradiction. And
Mm.
and for me, it's been a really important part to feel authentic, like not too overly positive and not too overly negative, because I think then you're kind of almost manipulating the audience. I don't know how to
Yeah.
explain. Like, let's be real about what we are dealing with right now. And it's really, it can be really hard. and yet
Yeah.
hopeful at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah,
That's sort of
I don't
why
know.
I do that.
For me on a personal level, I find that things are just, I don't even know if I can make a distinction between understanding any level of good or bad. I think it's just absolutely chaotic and confusing
Yeah. Oh
is
gosh,
where
right
I'm
now is
at.
a weird time. I'm not gonna. Oh my gosh,
Oh, it's
I ca-
disorienting. It's so disorienting.
it's
Yeah,
so
that's kind of
disorienting,
for this.
and that's one thing I think artists can remind us
Yeah,
in this time is like I don't think it's about DEI. I don't think it's about like I think what I'm saying is these words that we use that are describing the situation are
yeah,
inadequate. The truth of the matter is, do you want to make the world a more welcoming place for people or not?
yeah,
Like that
yeah,
is like everybody wants to feel that they have a place. Every single person does. And so like until we start talking about this stuff universally, like the discussions are always going to feel siloed, you know what I mean? And
yeah, yeah,
like is the goal moving us closer to everyone feeling like they have a place at the table or not? And I would argue right now we're not moving closer to that goal. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like on
yeah.
either end of the political spectrum, I think it's
Right.
like that's one of the things that artists can do. I think is you kind of
Help with the
point,
listening, maybe too. I
yeah,
don't know. Yeah,
orient hopefully to a conversation about like
yeah,
literally, especially in disability. Like to me, one of the things that's been hard to deal with or like think about is like it does seem so polarized even on both sides, to be honest. And polarization is hard because if I really believe in disability justice, which I do, it means that every single person has value and is deserving of respect. So when we devolve away from respectful dialogue, I think we're devolving away from disability justice. You know, like and it's hard because it's not like
yeah,
it's just everything is so there's so many
yeah,
emotions. I mean, I have them too. I'm not saying I'm like being Zen Buddhist over here because I'm not. But like, you know, just like
yeah, yeah,
disability
yeah,
justice to me, if anything, means two things. It means the world is more welcoming to everybody, and that we actively work to do that, and that also we treat everyone with dignity and respect. But that literally does have to mean everyone.
yeah,
It
yeah,
doesn't mean you have to condone illegal behavior or not provide like righting wrongs. Like you do need to do that, but the respect piece, if we're going to be authentic about what we mean,
yeah,
it
yeah,
literally does
yeah.
have to include everyone, which is hard. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's a
Oh, it's
hard
so
job.
difficult. It's not only
We
a
wouldn't
hard,
have
yeah.
we
Sometimes
wouldn't
I
have
think,
religion or spirituality or guidelines or any of
yeah,
that stuff if this was easy. Like we wouldn't need it, but it's not easy. So like therefore we need to like think about our like higher calling as people. Like what does that mean? And it is literally not going to be easy, and that's just true. It's not bad. It's just true. You know what I mean?
mm.
Sorry, I'm ranting at you. I feel
No,
so bad. I'm
no, no,
just
no, no,
so
no,
many
no, you
things
are not ranting.
boiling.
Everything you're saying is just, it's so impactful. And I think you have so much that needs to be heard, and yeah, like you can continue speaking, or I can also dive into the next question. Galen, you're such a pleasure to speak with, and you're so deeply multifaceted, in both your talent and, speaking about disability and also philosophically. I think, it sounds like I think I read somewhere you also had a background in studying something else. I think it was political science from what
Yeah,
I
poli
remember reading.
science,
So,
psychology.
so
Yeah,
it's just really wonderful. I feel like it's almost, what a wonderful gift, in a way, to have all of those combined and to be such an advocate, to be able to share, the work you're doing, through melody. So I'm in conclusion, I'm just saying, like, I so appreciate your rant.
oh thanks. Okay,
um,
good, because I was like,
but
oh no.
and and because I verbally also, like, I don't, sometimes my communication and processing gets a little confusing, and so that's why I just end up going back to the prompts and just
Yeah,
appreciate more of the listening. I was going to ask, are you currently working on any projects, or has there been something especially meaningful to you? And I'm guessing that maybe I could dive into the fact that you have been writing a book and have completed it.
yeah, yeah. So I wrote a memoir. I'm still editing it, so it's not quite submitted in its final form yet, but I finished the rough draft a little bit before Christmas and got like 10 friends to read it and got all their comments worked in. And now I'm working on, like, my editor read it after that. And now she's gotten comments for me and stuff. But writing a memoir, it's been interesting because, a lot of music people on the road would be like, when are you going to write about this? And I guess you just don't know what you don't know. I'm like, oh, someday that'd be fun. And it's a huge project, basically. Like, I'm glad I did it. It feels so
Yeah.
good to know that eventually there's going to be a book, but it was like not a light undertaking. And I'm
Oh,
kind of glad I didn't
yeah.
know what was going into it ahead of time because it was a lot. But
That's incredible. Well, when did you start?
I
Like, what do you
started
remember when you
in
started?
earnest writing. So I thought about it for like years, and then
Yeah.
I did an outline. Like, I didn't know what I was getting into. So, like, when you write a memoir, you have to create a pretty large. It's like a 100-page book proposal where you give like you give a page summary for every chapter. You have a
Wow.
press plan. You have all this stuff that I had no idea that you had to do. So that took me about a year to make. Like, because you also have to write 2 sample chapters, and I ended up
Oh
having to
my.
rewrite
I
them.
imagine that probably took you a little bit away from your music.
Oh yes, it did, and so that's the thing.
This
So I
is
did
pretty it
that.
sounds like this is pretty important. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
Go ahead.
think it is gonna be like it's a. So the book proposal took a year, and then in the fall of 2023, I started writing, like actually writing, and then I ended in December. So it took about 15 months to write it, and then
Wow.
now I'll be editing it, and it'll be coming out in April of 2026. And
And the title is called?
it's a little bit undecided. I
Oh,
can't tell you. I had a title. It was going to be called "Linger in the Sun." It might not
yes.
be
I
anymore.
thought okay. Oh,
But that's okay
interesting.
because if it's this other title, which I shouldn't probably say yet, I'll be really excited
Say
because it's the
it.
title I originally
Okay.
wanted. I know. Well, I can probably tell you. It
That's
would
okay.
be,
You don't have to, yeah.
yeah. It'll be after a song that's going to come out on the Macbeth soundtrack. So it hasn't been released yet. So
Ah.
I'm excited for that. But the thing
Linger well, li
is
sorry to interrupt, but the title "Lingered in the Sun" is, in fact, from one of your songs, right?
yeah, yep. Someday We'll Linger in the Sun is the name of the song I entered into the Tiny Desk contest.
That's the one, yeah. It's
But this
beautiful.
song feels like
Yeah.
it fits the story better. Like,
Mhm, mhm.
lingering in the sun implies that we have made it, and I think we're
Uh-huh.
working on it, right? And so I think this
Ah,
title will be
I
a little
see.
more reflective of the book, like if I get to change it,
Uh-huh.
and I'll know that pretty soon, and
Yeah.
maybe I'll send it your way when
Oh,
I'm
please
allowed to talk about
do.
it.
Oh, I
But
am so looking forward to it. And I
yeah,
I love that you mentioned it as like a love letter to everybody, like a warm, funny, deeply felt memoir about disability, music, and the messy creativity of an artist's life.
yeah, I hope
Um,
I mean what my goal of the book is, because it's kind of like, why would you write a memoir, right? As opposed to like making another album. Part of
uh-huh.
me wants people to think about disability from a more like identity perspective. I think a lot of the narratives we get about disability
Mhm.
are so like either you overcome it or it's a tragedy
Mm.
or somehow you manage to make
Like
it.
very black and white thing.
Yeah, and
Mhm,
I'm
mhm.
like, I don't think that's my experience. And and kind of explaining why advocacy matters. Like, I'm hoping that people read it and then feel like, oh, I guess if I became disabled, it might not be the end of the world. You know what I mean? Like, but there will still be things we need to work on. So I think
Mhm.
the idea of kind of just looking at disability from a more empowered perspective, I hope, is like the goal, because I just think it's a missing part of our dialogue a lot of the times. I mean, in the disability community, as
Yeah.
you know, like in Ramped, where we have met and stuff, it's a very empowering space. People do value their lives, and they like want to make a difference, and they're striving just as anyone else. But in the general public, that is not how we talk about disability. There's a
Right,
big
right,
disconnect, I think,
right.
between what we think of our lives and what other
Yes.
people think of our lives, and that's a
Oh,
problem.
yes. Oh, and yeah, that is probably for a much longer podcast
Yes,
just to
we'll be
break
here
down
for
just
5
the
hours.
discussion. Yeah, I feel like yeah, maybe we can continue it because yeah, it can get pretty heavy and so complex, to be able to yeah.
But that's the point of the book, is I wrote it with that in
Mhm.
mind, but I did try to keep a lot of humor and fun stuff in there, and then there's the other. I think it's pretty balanced, and that's why because I also just don't want people to read a book about disability and feel like that was so heavy, that was such a hard read. I'm so sad
Mm.
now. Like, I think it's balanced in a way where hopefully people walk away thinking a little more nuanced about disability. And
Mhm.
again,
Mhm.
it's only my perspective, which is why I think everybody with a disability who wants to should be writing and putting essays and books out and stuff, because I can't speak for anyone else's disability, and I'm not going to try. But I think if you start to learn, I mean, that's what I love about touring. You get to meet so many people, and
Mhm.
you realize everybody's life is perfectly valid and so diverse, and it's exciting. I see that as exciting, and I don't think we have to see it as like challenging if I'm right or wrong. It's more just like, no, how cool is it that there's
Yeah,
this many
learning
ways
about
to exist?
yeah, it is beautiful. I mean, just on a personal level, I'm only just tiptoeing into the disability and, the ramped world and discovering that kind of diversity. And I love that you use the term, exciting. And because for so many, pretty much most of my life, I never even felt okay saying the word disabled, and that's just
Yeah.
a topic on its own because, being raised inside of whatever it is, right? A family, a culture, an extremist religion that
Mhm.
really kind of puts so much shame on who you are and tells you to just pretend that disability doesn't exist because maybe you
Mhm.
can't see it. And so
Yep.
that's something that I had to kind of unlearn, and I'm still in the place of unlearning it. And so I just love the word you use, being excited when you're on tour, when you're meeting more people. Yeah. So, and on that note, oh, do you have like a favorite album that you worked on, or a song that you ever looked back on that I don't know, like warms your heart more than the other stuff?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I kind of think somebody said this once, so I'm not the one that thought of it, and I don't remember who said it, so I can't quote them, but like every album is sort of a snapshot of your life at that time. So
Mm,
every album has some nostalgia for me. I think creatively speaking, um, learning how to stay was a full band. I had never done that before, and I had a couple friends kind of co-produce it with me because I felt insecure about like how do I tell a guitarist what to do? I don't play guitar, I don't know chords. And turns out you don't really need to actually know that stuff if they know what they're doing. I like to work with people who can improvise and hear things, like playback melodies to me, because if they have a good ear, I don't have to have the like vocabulary.
So we're going to listen to a clip from one of your songs. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
There is a song called Bound by a Thread that opens up the album Learning How to Stay, which was my full band album. And I remember telling the band I want it to sound like you're walking into an attic that hasn't been touched in 40 years and there's dust everywhere and the door creaks and you come in and you're like looking at the past. And they were able to kind of create that sound. And the song Bound by a Thread is kind of about reincarnation, actually, about like how
Mm,
throughout the ages your impact trickles down, and and just continually trying to learn how to be more loving. That's what the song is about. So there's a note that repeats a C, bunk 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 bunk, all the way
mm,
through the song, but you don't always hear it, and sometimes you hear it, and there's a connecting thread. So that song, like, I loved making that song because sonically it matches the lyrics so much. It was just like a good experience to try to sonically make what I was feeling inside, even beyond just lyrics, but in the recording studio. I think recording studios can be so much fun. I don't know how much you prefer. I love playing live, but this was the first song where I was like, oh my gosh, you can do so much in the studio. Like, this is so amazing. So
yeah. Oh
that,
no, I for me, I definitely appreciate much more recording than I do live performance. I mean, I haven't played in a long time due to illness and speaking of, having disabilities, but
yeah.
so recordings are definitely um a little bit easier. And yeah, I feel like you become much more freeing. Like there's definitely a sense of like liberation. and you're not as vulnerable. I don't know if that's the same for you, but yeah,
I
for
mean,
me, it's like the life stages. It can be complicated, especially when I
yeah.
get for me, it's more like I get a lot of disruptions during live performance in my brain, so
Oh,
it
okay.
gets
Yeah.
more complicated.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep. No, that makes sense. Yeah, for me, it's like two completely different realms. Like recording was really scary, and I put a lot of pressure on myself. And then and I'm not totally good at this. I still sometimes put too much pressure on recording the perfect take or whatever. And so that kind of is a struggle to get through. For me, performing is a little bit different because I feel a lot of energy like come down through my head and go out through my chest, and it's like
Mm.
a physical sensation of energy flow into the audience. And for me, I guess what I try to do, and it's like meditation almost for me, because it's not natural, but I try to remind myself that this is not actually, you could have the worst show of your life, and somebody who needed to hear the lyrics will
Mm.
still get what they need out of it. So I really try to take myself out of the equation and just be a conduit of energy. So I
I
love
love that you
performing.
use the term meditation.
It really feels like that to me. Like,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
And it's not easy. Like you can get thrown off when you meditate, right? Like I do. I
Yeah,
frequently
yeah.
get thrown off, but when I'm in the moment, it feels pretty spiritual for me. So I do like
Huh.
performing, and I don't think I'd ever want to like I wouldn't just do the studio, but I like
Yeah,
both
yeah.
of them now, which is kind of new because I used to only like performing, and
Wow. So you
now
can
I feel
appreciate
they're,
both parts
yeah,
a
yeah.
little bit more as
Yep.
you worked after the last song that you just mentioned,
Yeah.
Sonic Sculpture.
Yeah.
I so look forward to listening to that now. Now, now I have to go listen to the track after we're done here.
Awesome. Bound, bound, bound by a thread, going down, down through the ages. You could have stayed, but you came here instead to fill my life's empty pages. And I do believe we'll see the fruits of our labor. Maybe not now, maybe.
I know that our listeners would like to hear a little bit more about perhaps the arts education that you received. I don't know if you had mentioned it earlier, but maybe you can briefly share a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I did orchestra through fifth grade all the way through senior year, and it was in public school. I was one of the like really nerdy orchestra kids that took like every orchestra possible and did the like auditioned and did a solo senior year. And I think the reason I was able, and this is kind of going back to the support team thing that you talked about at the beginning, is
Yeah.
I a lot of it's, like a disabled person or any musician, honestly, you put into it a certain amount and you get out a certain amount, right? So I put a lot into music. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't. I did. I put a lot, I practiced all the time. I really, but at the same time, because I played differently, the way I play violin up and down like a cello, there's a couple other things that are different too. Usually you use four fingers on the violin fingerboard, and I, because of the angle of my arm, can only use three. So I play a
Mm.
little differently that way. Also, my bow is very small, like a cello size bow or even a regular violin size bow is way too big. And so I use what's called a half size bow. It's just a lot shorter. And
Mm.
those two changes meant that through my education, through my like formal training, I needed my private lesson teachers to help me modify the music, because everybody has in orchestra, what happens is the conductor says, okay, finger, like like use these fingers for these notes. And I couldn't, it didn't translate correctly for me. I needed my own fingering, and I needed also the bowings. Like, so there's a high premium on everybody bowing the same way. It's like
Yeah.
ballet, kind of like the direction you're pulling or pushing. And I couldn't do what they were doing because I had a smaller bow. And
Yeah.
so I had
So
private lesson
in
teachers.
some ways, it sounds like you also were teaching them,
Yeah. Like,
a new
that's the
way
thing,
of
is my
looking at
private
things. Yeah.
lesson teachers had never taught anyone like me before. So we were
Wow.
learning together,
Mm.
but they were willing to do it. And I got lucky because we were pretty low income, my family.
Yeah.
And so my parents actually paid my private lesson teachers in dinner theater tickets. We didn't pay them money, but I think they were willing to do that because they were learning
That's not
too.
bad.
Like you say, they were like
Right, right, right.
trying to
Yeah,
find a
yeah,
new way to do it, and it was
yeah,
interesting to them. And
yeah.
and so I feel like
And little did you know that you were doing advocacy from such
yeah,
an
no,
early
no
time,
idea.
right?
Nope.
Like kind
Yep,
of
definitely not. No, yeah.
yeah,
So
that's
that
amazing.
thing is like
Yeah,
education. In some ways, you learn alongside your peers, but you do need certain supports behind the scenes. And
yeah.
it didn't have to be my orchestra teacher, but I did need somebody. And so I think the
Mhm.
myth that it's okay to need help, basically, is what I'm saying.
Oh
Like,
my gosh, yes, preach that, please. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and
It's so
and
good to
and
hear that.
then when I got the help, I did a lot with it. I still decided not to go into classical music because in order to play a fast passage high up on the violin, because I only had three fingers that I was working with, I like it took me so much longer to get those parts up to speed.
Mhm.
And I mean, I could have kept doing that. Some people do. They're like, I'm going to work 125% in order to get this because I want to. But it wasn't driving me.
Mm.
Like, I was like, I'd rather do some other kind of music that doesn't require like tons of extra
Right.
labor just to do what everybody else is doing.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
when I switched over to Celtic music, which is a lot more relaxed on technique, and like,
And you can enjoy it. Yeah,
and
you
you can enjoy
find a
it.
little bit
And
more joy without the burnout.
yeah, and so
Yeah,
for me,
yeah, yeah.
it's again, disabled people, if you want to compete in the same exact arena as everyone else with the same exact rules, that's totally fair. Like, you have the right to do that. But
Yeah, yeah,
also, again, you're not a lesser than, especially in the arts. You
yeah.
are not lesser than if you find a thing that suits you well
Mm.
and you do it, because you're creating something beautiful anyways. And like, art is so subjective. Classical music isn't inherently better than Celtic music, even if it thinks it is. You know what I mean? Like, it's not. So like, just do what
It's
fills you
just a
up.
whole bunch of bourgeois anyway.
I mean, I like classical music. I listen to it a lot, but it's certainly not the only kind of music, and it doesn't mean you're,
Thankfully.
you know,
Right, right,
yeah, like,
right.
I write my own music. A lot of classical violinists don't write their own music,
Mm.
and I'm not better than them, and they're not better than me, and we're all just making art. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
find something that works for you, and don't be afraid to adapt it, and don't be afraid to get
Oh,
support.
that actually leads me to the next question. Sorry to interrupt, but
No, that's cool.
might you have some advice you'd like to share with some of our younger disabled artists out there who might just be starting out?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is, it's okay to start really, really small. I
Yeah.
think, unfortunately, our internet culture makes us feel like if we're not going viral, we're doing something wrong. And especially disability, which I believe, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I am, that disability is sort of kept out of the algorithm. Like, you might not feel the traction that you think you should get right away. And I just want to encourage people to find another motivation for doing art. It should not be fame. like find it in yourself. Find it to help other people connect. Find it, to spread the view of the world that you believe is beautiful. Like, whatever it is, like, fame should not be your goal with art. And because you'll never be satisfied. And with disability, especially, where I think the cards are kind of stacked against us still, you got to do it for some other reason besides that. And for disabled artists, don't be afraid to ask for what you need. I'm not going to tell people you have to be like me and only play at accessible venues, because that's what I do. I only play at accessible venues.
Yeah.
I took a while to get there, so I understand that we all have our own timeline, but
Mm.
don't let yourself talk yourself out of it. If you feel called to do that, anything you do to make a point about accessibility to make it easier for the next generation is welcome. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we can demand a certain kind of conduct of all disabled artists. Like, we all have to be exactly on the same page. But just so you know, if you feel led to, like, say, I'm going to make my open mic, I'm going to move it to an accessible venue. That is great. Like, anything you can do helps. And there's nothing too small when it comes to making the music industry more welcoming. Like, do what you feel you can do. Don't let, like, perfect be the enemy of good. Like, do something. Don't be afraid to ask for what you need. And then also, my biggest piece of advice is find other disabled artists, because I think I didn't see my first disabled performers till I was in my 30s, besides myself, right? And I didn't realize how much it, like, helped my mental health to, like, realize I was not the only person out there doing this stuff.
Same here. Yeah,
I bet,
very
right?
similar. Yep. Oh, yeah. I mean, it really gave me a little bit more of a boost of confidence, to know that I wasn't alone. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely an important one.
Yeah, like,
And still a work, still a work in progress, and continuing
for sure it is.
those connections. I think it's so important to continue being empowered and empowering others through that. And I think that was probably for me the missing link for so many years. And I mean, even having you on now is just yet again a reminder and an inspiration, of rebooting myself in that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
so that's
community
incredible.
is big, and realizing
Yeah.
you're not alone is big, and just being able to talk to other artists who get that it's frustrating. Like, I mean, and then if you're not disabled and you're listening to this podcast, you have a role too. Disabled artists should not be the only ones playing at accessible venues. Like, we need to normalize that across the board, and you can be a part of the solution. Like, I really want to see bands, like, really embrace that mentality rather than say, well, that would be extra work, because it is extra work. I'm not going to lie. I only book accessible venues. It adds a lot of labor because it's hard to find them. And sometimes I have to tell a venue, like, what to do to become more accessible. I mean, it is extra work. I'm not going to pretend that it's not.
And probably money for them, right? Like,
Yep.
I
And
bet you've
sometimes it
come
is.
across
Yeah.
that as well, right? They're like, financially, we don't have the funds, and so that's why we don't have like a ramp or something like that.
Yeah. But you vote with your dollar, right? And so that's why I
Right.
still only play at accessible venues, because I want them to be the ones that make it in 10 years financially. Like, I don't want like, we don't need to perpetuate the cycle of inaccessible spaces. So artists who are not disabled have a responsibility too, I think. And it doesn't, again, baby
Absolutely.
steps, right? But don't
Yeah.
ignore it. It's a real issue.
Yeah. And I feel, oh my gosh, don't get me started. I feel like you mentioned a little bit about, the politics, and I don't know. I feel like that's just opening up a whole new subject. But I do feel like we're living in a time where now more than ever, it just feels like we keep on being gaslit, as disabled artists, but definitely people on, minority and, the underserved. It's like right now, it just seems even harder, and it feels like we may have to work even harder than before, because we're going to be knocked down just a little bit more, or denied our rights or being mocked. I feel like we're living in a culture now that maybe is, a little bit chaotic in this area. So we need
Oh
voices
my gosh,
like
yes.
yours, Gaelynn.
No, it's a real thing. Like, anything we can do to keep disability authentically told front and center is going to be really important right now. I mean, they're talking about turning back laws that are, like, the foundation of disability rights, like the Section 504. They're talking about repealing that, and that would be disastrous, like, straight up disastrous. And so, doesn't mean we're going anywhere, but it does mean we need to make sure that we're present and accounted for and loud enough where people have to listen. And also, to be honest, like, and I hate to say this, but, like, inclusive enough where we can be like, look, you don't agree with me, let's talk about this. And maybe there won't be movement on the other side. I mean, I don't think everybody's a good faith actor necessarily here, but I
Especially
do.
when I think it's also especially because when they seem to be so far removed from, say, people with disabilities. When you're so far removed, how could you actually understand and support those who
Yeah.
actually who need that accessibility? It's almost like yeah, it becomes this kind of, complete disregard because they don't,
Mm-hmm.
it's very
Well,
unfortunate.
yeah, and that's why I just keep
Yeah.
making your art and putting it out there, because
Yeah.
there are, I think, some people, not everybody, but there are some people that just never learned or don't really understand, and if they did understand, they would care. Like, I
Yes.
don't think that's
Yes.
everybody,
Right.
but I do think there are people out there,
Yeah.
because if you think about it, we didn't, I mean, can't speak for you, but I did not learn about the disability rights movement in school at any point
Yeah. No, no.
of my
Yeah.
education. And
Yeah.
so how do I expect other people, like, I'm invested in it, I learned about it later in life because I care. But if you don't have a reason to learn about it, there's many people like existing on this planet who've never thought about it before, and it doesn't mean they're necessarily inherently evil, but
Right. Right.
they're
And some,
not
right.
educated.
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you got to educate, and
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
are, unfortunately, in this modern climate right now, we are going to have to be the ones to
The
educate,
the
because
irony of using the word modern climate.
unmodern.
Right.
Yes,
It's so,
backwards.
isn't that kind of
Yeah, it is
hilarious?
ironic.
It's funny, not funny, but anyway. Yeah.
You're totally right. Yeah.
Advanced, but not. But anyway, Gaelynn,
Present day. I'll just say present day, not
in
modern.
present day. No,
Yeah,
no. Oh no, you can use the word modern. Actually, it makes a much more powerful statement,
that's
because it
true.
is
Yeah.
quite ironic.
Yes, it is
Um,
totally.
anyway, continued work to be done.
Yes.
Gaelynn, oh, you are such a multifaceted, completely inspiring,
Oh,
strong-willed in so many ways, absolutely beautifully opinionated, and of course a talented individual.
oh,
Yeah, I've had such a pleasure speaking with you and getting to learn more about you and the extraordinary work you have been doing and you continue to do. To be
yeah,
continued off, maybe on another podcast or
yeah.
something. This this is actually my last podcast with the Berklee College of Music
Darn.
with
Okay.
Able. It's bittersweet, but thank you, Daniel and Dr. Rhoda for really giving me such an incredible opportunity, especially during a double whammy of a medical illness that threw me off guard, and I didn't think that I would have any projects to do because I hadn't been
Yeah.
performing. So I thank them and I thank you, Gaelynn, for taking the time out of your really busy, schedule right now to hop on and share who you are.
Thanks. Thanks for
And
having me.
yeah,
And thanks for doing this. This is a good podcast. I'm excited to share it with people.
where can people find your work? Do you want to share?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I have a website. It's violinscratches.com, like cat scratch, like a violinscratches.com. I also have a Substack. It's just gaelynlee.substack.com, and it's the title of it is Creative Living for Everybody.
Hmm.
And I try to write about disability and the arts and how everybody can live a creative life in, like, literally everybody, and just kind of expanding that conversation of personal development or artistic development to include people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And so that's important to me. And then I have Bandcamp. I have my albums up there. They're on Spotify. They're everywhere. But the two best places are probably my website and my Substack, and then Bandcamp if you want to hear the songs that we talked about.
Great. Oh, and be sure to mention your book one more time.
Oh my
Look out
gosh,
for it
yes.
if you
I
want.
will be releasing my memoir, unyet named memoir, in April. And if you want to follow along, I know I'll be writing about it, and I'm actually going to be sharing some of the things that got cut ahead of time
Mm,
with my Substack subscribers, because there's a lot. I wrote a lot more than is going to end up in the final book, and so
yeah.
some of the stories I'm going to share on Substack ahead of the book release.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
yeah,
Nice.
follow along there
Do you
if you
think you're
want.
gonna
And
write
it's
another book after this?
I think what I'd like to do is write a book specifically about how everybody in the world can be a participant in, like, personal and creative development. It just doesn't look the way that it's been shared in the past. Because I'm a big fan of, like, growing and learning and changing, but I feel like a lot of times you read books like that and it's like, don't think about disability,
Yeah.
don't identify with it, like, disability is bad, be grateful you're not disabled.
Yes.
The messaging is
Oh.
so backwards, so
Mm.
damaging. And so sometimes I'll be in the middle of a book that I'll really be enjoying and getting a lot out of, and then all of a sudden I just want to like throw it against the wall. You know what I mean? Like stomp on it and like run over it. And so because it's the psychology of how we think about disability as the opposite of growth or creative expression or
Mm.
of like potential is so
Oh,
damaging
yeah.
to so many people.
Oh,
And I
right.
kind of want to write a book about that, and it
It's
would
like
be a
collectively
nonfiction.
stunting. That's how it still feels,
Yes.
you know? Yeah.
I mean, that's why people fear getting old. I
Yeah.
mean, not to start a whole new podcast, but like, you know, when we talk about your body changing, people really
Yeah.
aren't
Yeah.
okay with it because they can't picture a world where they could still be creatively happy. And you
Right.
can, you
I have a
can.
song
Like
about that.
I'm like,
It's called
really?
Hypnotized by Youth. It's like it's
Oh, that's
floating
awesome.
around on Bandcamp.
Okay, well, I'm
Speaking
gonna
of
go listen to
aging,
that one
it's just
specifically.
it's
Yeah,
just more of a silly kind of, funny, humorous, and painful take on
yeah,
being hypnotized by
yeah.
youth.
Thank you though for this conversation. I really
Oh, you're
appreciate
so
it.
welcome, and thank you. And thank you all for tuning into the Able Voices podcast on this last podcast. Well, me, but you can continue listening to the Able Voices podcast with other continued guest co hosts on here because this is a fabulous space to be and super, super important. So please do join us, or rather join them next time to hear the latest on these wonderful up and coming artists living with disabilities who are currently making incredible change and impact right now in the creative industry. And here's to looking towards a future where disability and arts culture is simply just part of the norm. My name is Rivky, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Able Voices is a production of the Berkeley Institute for Accessible Arts Education, led by me, Dr. Rhoda Bernard, the founding managing director. It is produced by Daniel Martinez del Campo. The intro music is by Kai Levin, and our closing song is by Sebastian Batista. Kai and Sebastian are students in the arts education programs at the Berkeley Institute for Accessible Arts Education. If you would like to learn more about our work, find us online at berkeley.edu/BIAAE or email us at BIAAE@berkeley, that's LEE.edu.